At age 48, Tom Brady is still etched in the American psyche as the greatest icon in NFL history, a man who accomplished what no one before or after him could replicate. He is the owner of 7 Super Bowl rings, a record that towers over every quarterback who ever lived. He is the architect of unimaginable comebacks, the one who turned the most desperate moments into heart-stopping revivals that left the world breathless. His name is synonymous with endurance, absolute discipline, and passes sharp as a blade slicing through the defenses of the strongest teams. He shattered every statistic: most wins in history, most playoff appearances, most passing yards, most touchdowns. In New England, he built a dynasty that lasted 2 decades. When he left, he immediately took Tampa Bay, a franchise lost for years, to Super Bowl glory in his very first season. He is the man who made turning 40 no longer the end of a career, but the start of a new chapter for the unbeatable. From the skinny kid overlooked in the 199th pick of the draft, Brady rose to become the GOAT, the legend who forced an entire nation to bow in respect. But behind that dazzling glory lies a brutal reality that America never wants to face. Behind those championship rings is a body torn apart by thousands of hits, knees so painful he had to brace against the wall every morning, a right shoulder burning so badly he couldn't hold his kids for long, a memory fading from concussions he once hid to avoid being pulled from the field. Behind the smiles for the cameras are endless nights in an empty house after divorce, where he hears the wind instead of children running around, where the bedroom still carries Giselle's perfume but the warmth is gone. Behind the praise are hundreds of articles dissecting his private life, accusing him of being a man who chose glory over family. And in those absolutely silent nights, Tom Brady felt something he had never known in his life, that he no longer belonged anywhere, no longer to the field, he had walked away from it, no longer to the home, where the family had broken apart, no longer to the hero image that America had built. But even when the world believed he had fallen, Brady began to fight in the only way he knows, quietly, relentlessly, and with unbreakable will, because for him pain has never been the end. It is a reminder that the strongest people are not those who have never been broken, but those who know how to rise amid the shards of themselves. And the most haunting question still follows him like a shadow: who will embrace the hero when the hero falls? If you want to continue the journey deeper into the dark corners that Tom Brady has never revealed, please subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Thank you for joining, and we'll continue the story right after this. Tom Brady's childhood was not the story of a kid growing up in poverty or violent neighborhoods, but it was the story of a boy raised in a world where he always felt he didn't belong. From early elementary school, Tom was the skinniest in class, the weakest on the team, the slowest on the field. While other kids ran like the wind on the grass, Tom was often left behind, panting, reaching but never catching up. His parents loved him, but that warm love wasn't enough to ease the sting in his heart every time he heard mocking laughter behind him. In a country that worships strength, young Tom Brady quickly learned that some skies were not meant for him. His 3 older sisters, Maureen, Nancy, and Julie, were all outstanding athletes. Basketball, softball, and swimming trophies gleamed in the Brady living room like silent proof that this family was born to be strong. Except for him, Tom was the only one bringing home average report cards, always at the bottom of physical fitness tests, and encouragement that sometimes sounded like pity. He loved sports, but sports didn't love him back. He wanted recognition, but nothing in his childhood gave him hope that he would ever achieve it. On summer afternoons, when the whole Brady family gathered in the backyard to play baseball or throw a football, Tom was always picked last. His throws were weak, slow, and inaccurate. His runs were short and timid. But the deepest pain wasn't the failure, it was the feeling of isolation when he saw his family laughing together while he, for some reason, stood by the fence like a spectator. That feeling, being on the outside of his own life, clung to Tom Brady from a very young age. At school, things weren't any better. Tom didn't stand out in class, wasn't picked for the cool groups, wasn't the kind of student teachers remembered by name. He was always the type others passed by as if he didn't exist. While other boys started building muscle, their voices deepened, and their bodies changed, Tom still looked like a child who hadn't grown up yet. Late development left him far behind in every sport, from running and jumping to throwing. For a boy who loved sports with all his heart, it wasn't just a disadvantage, it was pain. He began to understand the bitter truth. Some people are born with advantages he would never touch. On nights lying in bed, Tom often wondered why God made him so different. His three sisters were strong, talented, and always full of confidence. He looked at them like distant stars, beautiful, shining but never his. He felt like a crack in his family's perfect picture, a void, an exception, the weak one. But what the world doesn't know is that very weakness became the source of a quiet storm forming in his heart, a storm of endurance, a storm of yearning to be seen. Tom Brady grew up carrying that silent pain in every step he ran, every gasping breath, every time he was called skinny kid, every moment standing at the end of the line. And from that he developed the disease he would never cure for the rest of his life, the disease of those left behind too many times. The obsession with being forgotten. That obsession turned every mocking word into a small cut, every failure into a scar that never healed, and every childhood memory into an invisible burden he carried into adulthood. But unlike kids who chose to avoid it, Tom chose to face it. He didn't quit. He didn't accept the fate of the weak. He quietly started throwing the ball every afternoon, running even when his legs shook, lifting even when his arms turned red from dropped balls. No one saw those afternoons, no one knew how persistent he was. But those silent drops of sweat, those tiny sparks of hope were the first bricks laying the foundation for one of the greatest journeys in sports history. Tom Brady grew up in a world of the strong, but he wasn't born strong. He built his strength from insecurity, from disadvantage, from loneliness, and from pains no one thought a frail kid like him could endure. And that is what makes his story so tragic yet so full of hope, because before becoming a legend, Tom Brady was just a weak boy trying to run toward his own place in life. If childhood made Tom Brady feel left behind, then his years at the University of Michigan turned that feeling into a cut so deep, it seemed it would end his career before it even began. Michigan wasn't an ordinary school, it was a machine producing America's top quarterbacks. It was where the strongest, fastest, most confident young men gathered. Guys who grew up believing football was their destiny. In that world, Tom Brady, skinny, slow, with no physical edge, walked in like a grain of sand lost in the desert. On his first day in the team meeting room, Brady knew he would have to fight for every inch, every glance, every chance. But he couldn't imagine fate had in store a humiliation no one before him had endured. Being ranked QB7, not QB2, QB3, or QB4. QB7, a ranking that barely exists in college football. It was the spot for guys only called when the team needed someone to operate the practice camera or fill an empty seat in meetings. QB7 had no dreams. QB7 had no future. QB7 existed only to remind others that some people are born to stay in the shadows. Tom Brady was that person. For 4 years, Brady barely touched the field. His game jerseys stayed pristine in the locker room, his cleats cleaner than his spirit. The coaches didn't believe he was good enough. Teammates didn't see him as part of the team. The press never mentioned his name in preseason roster predictions. To everyone, Tom Brady was just the guy walking the halls, a shadow, a background character, excess baggage. Many nights in the dorm, Brady sat alone, the dim desk lamp reflecting a face full of disappointment. The journal entries from that time are filled with piercing questions. Should I quit? Was I really born for this, or am I just hurting myself more? Some nights he turned to the wall, pillow wet with tears, trying not to let his roommate hear his sobs. He didn't cry over losses, he cried over feeling invisible, feeling unworthy of anyone's belief. That is a pain not every gifted athlete understands. It was at Michigan that Brady experienced his own version of mailroom humiliation, as painful and ruthless as the days Simon Cowell was treated like an anonymous mail clerk at EMI. But unlike Cowell, Brady had no alternative career, no backup dream. All he had was the small wish to be seen, heard, believed in. and Michigan denied him all of it. As semesters passed, Brady learned the system wasn't built for the persistent, it was built for the naturally gifted, so he created his own value the only way he knew, outworking everyone. When the practice field emptied, that's when Brady started throwing. When the gym music shut off, that's when he did sit-ups. When the video room door locked, Brady sat in the hallway rewatching defensive film over and over. No one saw those moments. No one knew the abandoned skinny kid was sharpening himself into a mental weapon. But the pain of Michigan wasn't just physical and isolation. It was in the moments standing behind the bench, watching teammates play under bright lights while his dream was only a few steps away. It was in team meetings when the coach talked about the program's future without ever mentioning him. It was in phone calls home when he pretended to be cheerful, while his heart broke piece by piece. But Michigan wasn't just where Tom Brady was crushed. It was where his greatest lifelong weapon was forged: discontent. That discontent didn't make him bitter, it made him hungry to live. It taught him that if he didn't save himself, no one would. It showed him that the underestimated are often the most dangerous when they find a reason to rise. It was at Michigan that Tom Brady died once, the death of the naive hope that talent alone would make him succeed. And there a different Tom Brady was born, colder, more stubborn, more resolute, carrying an unspoken vow: no one will ever make me feel invisible again. From that point, his journey was no longer about seeking opportunity. It was about reclaiming the place the world had refused to give him. And when the NFL door cracked open, even just a sliver, Brady decided he would never let it close again, no matter the cost. If the years at Michigan taught Tom Brady the pain of being abandoned, then the 2000 NFL Draft Day was the moment that turned that pain into a lifelong scar, one that even with 7 Super Bowls would never fade. Brady arrived at the draft with slim but genuine hope. He knew he wasn't a top pick, wasn't a name plastered on mock draft boards, but deep down, he believed that at least someone would see the determination in him. One glance, one acknowledgement, one small chance. Yet after more than 6 hours sitting in the family living room in San Mateo, Brady could only stare at the TV screen, his face growing harder with each passing pick as the 198th player, the last one selected before him, was announced. The first 6 rounds went by without a single camera panning to him, without a single commentator mentioning his name, without any expert offering a single prediction about his future. Tom Brady was completely invisible. As the clock ticked into the final picks, what tightened his heart wasn't just disappointment, but a familiar piercing feeling, the feeling of being rejected by the world once again, just like at Michigan, just like in childhood. The ESPN cameras focused on the shining faces, the powerful builds, the fiery quarterbacks America had idolized long before they entered the NFL. No one noticed that in California, a skinny young man was sitting on the edge of his seat, hands clasped so tightly they turned white, trying to stay calm while the world passed him by as if he didn't exist. Throughout the broadcast, cruel comments rang out like knife slashes straight into his heart. Brady's too slow, not enough muscle for the NFL, weak arm, no deep ball ability, not athletic, no upside, might get cut in training camp. Each remark was like a hammer blow nailing the coffin of his career shut. And Brady, who had endured seasons of being treated as excess, understood that if no one picked him, all those years of sacrifice at Michigan would mean nothing. The most painful moment wasn't when teams passed on him, it was when he himself started to wonder, maybe they're right, maybe I really am not good enough. Then the phone suddenly rang, an unknown number from Massachusetts. That moment happened so fast his heart didn't even have time to pound. On the other end were the New England Patriots, a team few expected to take a late-round quarterback. He heard Bill Belichick and the Patriots staff say a few short words, and that was it. Brady officially became the 199th pick. No fireworks, no cameras, no cheers, no press conference. Just a young man sitting silently on the couch, eyes on the floor, trying to hide the tremor in his voice as he told his family he'd been selected. That wasn't a moment of triumph. It was a moment of humiliation wrapped in hope. He knew full well he was just a filler pick, a number on a list, a selection the Patriots could drop any time. But right in that moment when he felt he'd hit rock bottom, something else rose up, a stubborn, defiant, resentful fire. That was the moment Tom Brady quietly made a promise to himself, a vow that never left his mind for the next 2 decades. "I'll make them regret it." That promise wasn't to the world, it was to the weak little boy left behind on the playground long ago, to the college kid buried at QB7, to himself in the moment he was dismissed to the point of invisibility. Brady stood up, rubbed his face, took a deep breath. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. He knew he'd have to fight for a spot even in the locker room, let alone on the field. But somewhere in his wounded heart was a resolve no one could see, the resolve of those never-handed victory, who only know how to tear themselves apart to seize it. And that was the day America thought Tom Brady was just a name at the bottom of the list. But really, it was the day Tom Brady was born a second time, not as a player, but as a survivor, a warrior, someone who would spend his entire life proving that the overlooked aren't failures, they're just preparing to do what no one dares, and he did. If the 199th pick was the NFL's first slap to Tom Brady, then his early years with the New England Patriots were a prolonged chain of humiliation, isolation, and silent challenges that for anyone else would have been enough to break a lifetime of patience. When Brady walked into the Patriots training facility in the summer of 2000, he wasn't stepping into the new home of his future, he was entering a cold world where no one believed he deserved to exist. To the Patriots organization, Tom Brady was just a camp arm, an extra arm to throw balls in practice, a backup used to run drills for the starters, a name called when needed and forgotten when not. He was slotted as QB4, the lowest rung on the ladder. Rookies usually got their own lockers, but not Brady. He had to share temporary space with a backup kicker, as if the team wanted to remind him, "You're just passing through." Teammates looked past him rather than at him. They greeted each other with friendly backslaps, chatted loudly in the locker room, while Brady got only polite nods, skeptical glances, as if they were wondering how a skinny frame like that could possibly survive in the NFL. His lunches were always the same. Sitting at a corner table, eating fast, headphones on but no music playing, just pretending to be busy, to hide the fact that no one invited him to join. No one called his name, no one checked on the rookie from Michigan, no one remembered what pick he was. Brady ate alone, trained alone, went home alone. Every day at the Patriots was a wordless test, long intimidating hallways, where his footsteps echoed like a reminder he was alone in this fight. No one believed he'd survive his first season, even Brady sometimes didn't believe it. The Patriots roster was full of young talent, extraordinary athletes, guys who had everything Tom Brady lacked: speed, size, rocket arms. He stood out like a lost sparrow in a flock of eagles, but there was one thing no one saw, a fire smoldering inside him, absolute loneliness. And it was that loneliness, not talent, that turned Brady into a monster of discipline. While other players chatted, Brady studied defensive film. While they went out to dinner, he ran extra sprints. While they went home to family or girlfriends, Brady lay alone on his living room floor, stretching until his legs shook from fatigue. For him, no workout was enough. No hour was spare. He knew that if he didn't save himself, no one would. So every night, as the Patriots' facility lights dimmed, that's when Brady began his own session. He threw balls under the faint glow of overhead lights, each snap echoing thump in the cold indoor air. His gloves tore, balls dropped constantly, but he didn't stop. He ran drills until 11 p.m., when the cleaning staff were the last ones left to witness a young man so exhausted, he nearly collapsed, yet still refusing to leave the field. Some nights Brady worked until he was drained, lying on his back on the turf with ragged breaths, staring at the dark ceiling with a nameless sadness welling up inside. He wasn't sure about the future, but he was sure of one thing: he wouldn't let the world treat him as disposable ever again, because by then he understood that the NFL didn't care who he had been. The NFL only cared who he would become, and if he wanted to survive, if he wanted to be seen, he had to fight in a way the favored never had to. He had to trade his youth for every breath in this brutal world. He had to bleed to climb a single step on a ladder others scaled with talent alone. Brady learned to forge himself with pain. Every slight meant one more rep, Every mocking glance meant one more film session. Every critical article meant one more hour in the weight room. He turned humiliation into fuel, and loneliness into an engine that never shut off. In the end, through all those long nights, no one knew a new Tom Brady was being formed, colder, sharper, tougher and hungry to a dangerous degree. Those late-night workouts to exhaustion under the dim Patriots gym lights didn't just hone his skills, they honed his soul, turning him into something the NFL had never seen, someone with nothing to lose, willing to do anything to be recognized. And that's what set Brady apart. People often think legends are born from talent, but Brady was different. He was born from pain. He was raised by loneliness. And in those dark nights, he understood a truth the world would take years to realize. Tom Brady didn't need anyone to believe in him. He only needed a chance to make them regret ever doubting him. And that fateful door, the one he had knocked on thousands of times in desperation, was about to crack open. Tom Brady's rise didn't begin with triumphant music or dazzling lights. It began with a brutal collision that nearly took another man's life. The day Drew Bledsoe, the Patriots' hero, the team's icon, the highest-paid quarterback in the NFL, was hit hard in the chest by Mo Lewis's tackle, the entire stadium fell silent for a few seconds. Bledsoe lay motionless, breathing faintly, blood leaking inside, panic everywhere. And as he was carried off the field to the sound of ambulance sirens, the Patriots' fate was thrown into uncertainty. In that chaos, Bill Belichick turned and pointed to the name no one thought would ever step onto the field, Tom Brady. A skinny backup QB, with no experience, no reputation, someone most of the team didn't even remember the jersey number of. It wasn't a choice, it was necessity. Brady was thrust onto the field like the last reserve soldier in a collapsing battle. As his feet touched the grass, nearly all of America smirked. On live TV, commentators said outright, "The Patriots are done." Rival fans mocked Shrimp QB. The press later called it the most desperate moment in New England history. And Brady, he stepped onto the field with hands trembling inside his gloves, heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of his chest. Standing in front of tens of thousands of fans and millions watching on TV, Brady felt as small as the day he was ranked QB7 at Michigan. The lights were too bright, the cheers were too loud, the responsibility was too heavy. He wasn't just fighting for the Patriots, he was fighting for the part of his life the world had repeatedly told him didn't belong to him. In those first minutes, Brady threw with obvious hesitation. Every decision came from fear of making a mistake. Every pass was a silent prayer. His movements were stiff and awkward, as if his feet still couldn't believe he was really in the NFL. But then something happened. Something that happens to people who've been knocked down too many times, until they have nothing left to lose. The lights weren't too bright anymore. The cheers weren't too loud. And the ball in Brady's hands, the thing that once made him tremble, suddenly felt as light as breath. A beast deep inside him awakened. That beast wasn't born from talent, but from years of being dismissed, from the loneliness of QB4, from the humiliation of the 199th pick, from the nights training until collapse in the dim gym. Brady began reading the opposing defense with different eyes, the eyes of someone so used to pressure that it had become a companion. He controlled the game with an eerie calm. Short, accurate throws started appearing, quick decisions began to shine, and every time the Patriots scored, the team turned toward Brady with looks of surprise mixed with hope. After each play he felt what he'd craved his whole life, recognition. No one said it out loud, no one slapped him on the back, but their eyes had changed. They no longer saw him as a shadow. They started seeing him as part of the team. All of America, too busy celebrating those early wins, didn't realize Brady was fighting a different war, a war inside his own heart, because every throw wasn't just a play. It was vengeance for all the years he'd been left behind. Every time the Patriots scored, it wasn't just the scoreboard that changed. A wound in Brady's heart was stitched up, and every time the crowd roared, it wasn't just the stadium that shook. The memories of that weak little boy from long ago shook too. Under the pads and helmet, no one saw his hands still shaking, his heart still aching from the pressure, because victory doesn't lighten fear, it only makes the road ahead more dangerous. Brady knew that if he failed, people would say we were right about him. But if he won, maybe, just maybe, the world would finally see him. And Brady, the kid always overlooked, was so hungry to be seen that nothing could stop him. By the end of that season, Tom Brady was no longer an ordinary backup. He became the leader, the heartbeat of the Patriots, the one the whole team started to trust. But the most tragic part is this: while America cheered the rise of a hero, Brady himself felt more pain than ever, because he understood he wasn't loved for who he was, but for the wins he delivered. And that's the greatest pain for those who've been abandoned. They have to do the extraordinary just to earn temporary love. Tom Brady saved the Patriots, but he hadn't saved himself yet, and the real storm had only just begun. The first golden era of Tom Brady wasn't the glittering myth America loves to tell. It wasn't a path paved with fireworks, championship trophies, and cheers, but a journey full of blood, tears, fear, and exhausting nights that Brady never admitted to anyone. After Drew Bledsoe went down and Brady was thrown onto the field like a backup soldier, no one in the Patriots or the NFL thought a miracle was starting to form. No one. But then the impossible happened. The New England Patriots, led by a skinny young man dismissed by the entire world, won Super Bowl XXX, a victory like magic, like an earthquake that upended the entire NFL structure. People said, it was just luck this year. But then Brady and the Patriots came back. They won another Super Bowl, then another, 3 Super Bowls in 4 years. A feat so great that even NFL legends had to step back and look at Brady with awe and caution. A boy once rejected became the king of the NFL. In a span so short, no one could process what had just happened. But amid that blinding light were dark corners. Brady hid so well that even those closest to him barely noticed. The truth is that behind every title was a body worn down. Behind every ring was a sleepless night. Behind every perfect throw was pain no medication could touch. In his first Super Bowl season, Brady threw with a finger swollen purple, nearly twice its normal size from a severe sprain. Some mornings he couldn't close his hand, but by afternoon he still had to grip the ball, rotate his wrist, move his arm through needle-like pain. The next season, his shoulder hurt so much that at times he couldn't put on a t-shirt without the physical therapist lifting his arm for him. But every week, he took the field like nothing happened. And he never let a word about that pain slip out. He knew all too well if he showed weakness, the NFL would swallow him alive. And insomnia, that was Brady's most terrifying companion. While others slept soundly after wins, Brady lay awake, staring at the ceiling as if it were pressing down on his chest. Not from excitement, but from crushing pressure, like drums pounding in his head. Pressure to hold on to victory. Pressure to prove it wasn't luck. Pressure to be worthy of the position fate had given him. No one taught him how to live with a nation's expectations. No one told him that when you become a hero, the only thing left is fear of being toppled. And Brady, for all his strength, felt that fear deeper than anyone. Off the field, the world thought Brady was enjoying the life of a champion, but they didn't see the dark corners that never appeared in NFL films, documentaries. Dinners alone in his car, because he feared paparazzi would photograph and analyze every expression as a sign of impending disaster. They didn't know that after practice, while teammates went out for beers, Brady quietly drove to the beach, sitting for hours watching waves crash to try to calm the panic in his chest. They didn't know that after every win, Brady's heart tightened even more, as if an invisible hand were choking him. If I lose next time, everything will collapse. Friends say that in the early years of his career, Brady lived in a state of hypervigilance, a chronic stress that made it hard to eat, sleep, relax, and kept him always on guard as if an enemy were right behind him. But Brady never complained. Never. Partly from pride, partly because he was used to carrying pain alone from the Michigan years, from the 199th pick, from being QB4 with the Patriots. He understood that loneliness was his fuel. He wasn't allowed to share it. He had to keep it to survive. And that very loneliness, placed amid the blazing glory of the NFL, created the most beautiful paradox of Brady's career. The brighter the light, the deeper the darkness inside him. That's why he trained harder than anyone, not from greed, but from fear that one moment of slack would let the world abandon him again like before. That's why he watched film until exhausted, not from perfectionism, but because he felt that if he didn't work twice as hard as others, he'd go back to being excess like at Michigan. That's why he pushed himself to the point that one year doctors warned his body was exceeding natural limits, and if he continued, he could destroy both his career and long-term health. But Brady didn't care, because for him the scariest thing wasn't injury, it was being forgotten. That fear is what made him the Brady America knows, cold, precise, emotionless, ruthless on the field. But that was just a mask. The truth beneath the mask was a man too sensitive, too fragile, too desperate for love, that he was willing to destroy his body to hold on to recognition from people who didn't even know who he really was. When the Patriots won their third Super Bowl ring in 4 years, America called it the start of an empire. But for Brady, it was the moment he realized he was standing on a mountaintop where the cold wind never stopped blowing. He saw the world cheering him, but felt no warmth. That fierce glory, beautiful like sunlight, was cold like metal in winter night. And Tom Brady, the man the world thought was living in ultimate happiness, was lonelier than ever, because he understood the road ahead would have no room for the weak. And even though his heart trembled, his body ached, his mind was exhausted, he knew one thing: he had to keep climbing, because if he stopped, everything he'd endured would become meaningless. And so Brady kept going, not for glory, but out of fear of falling back into the abyss he'd climbed out of since childhood. But that journey, for all its brilliance, would also start tearing his soul apart in ways America had never seen, because from here the darkness would only grow deeper. But then in 2008, when Tom Brady was standing at the pinnacle like an invincible god, fate suddenly unleashed all its weight in one single cruel moment. A moment that left the entire football world holding its breath, and sent Brady's life veering in a direction even he couldn't foresee. The season opener, Patriots vs. Chiefs. Just minutes into the game, Brady attempted what seemed like a routine throw, but in an instant, NFL's safety was torn apart. Bernard Pollard crashed into his leg with the force of a mini-truck. Brady's knee bent backward in an unnatural direction, and in that tiny yet merciless moment, a snap echoed, the tearing of his ACL. Tens of thousands of fans in the stadium shot to their feet, but Brady did not. He lay there, clutching his knee, electric pain shooting from his leg straight to his heart. He tried to stand, but his leg collapsed like rotten wood. In that moment, Brady knew, no MRI needed, no doctor required. He knew his knee was shattered, and maybe his career too. As he was carted off the field, head down, eyes glazed from shock and agony, the entire NFL seemed to freeze. And just hours later, cold headlines appeared across every major sports outlet. Brady era is over. Patriots' dominance has ended. Brady will never be the same. His time is up. For a man who had spent his life fighting doubt, nothing was crueler than reading those words, while his body writhed in pain. But the cruelest part was yet to come. In surgery, doctors confirmed not only the ACL but the MCL was completely torn too. His knee was nearly pulverized. That hit didn't just take him off the field, it stole his ability to walk, run, throw, everything that made him the man he had spent a lifetime becoming. The early days after surgery were pure hell. Brady lay in a dark room, curtains drawn, the smell of antiseptic clinging to every breath, his knee swollen like a ball, pain so intense that even the brush of bedsheets made him grit his teeth. In the darkness of that hospital room, Brady was no longer a 3-time Super Bowl champion. He was just a panicked man who had lost the most precious thing in his life, a man terrified he would never step onto a football field again. At night, pain kept him awake. By day, despair made it hard to breathe. Never in his life had Brady felt so clearly how quickly the world could turn its back. The articles, the criticism, the skeptical looks, all cut like knives into his already broken heart. Years later, Brady admitted there were nights he lay awake staring at the ceiling with only one question in his mind: if there's no more football, what's left of me? As if his entire identity had been severed from the only foundation he had ever stood on. In the first month of recovery, Brady couldn't walk without crutches. He had to brace against walls for every small step around the house. Each step was a silent scream. Every physical therapy session was torture. The ACL wasn't just torn, it was shredded. Relearning to walk started from zero, like a child learning to stand. Sessions left him drained, sometimes nauseous from pain. There were days on the treadmill when tears streamed down from stabbing knee pain. Days he couldn't complete even 10 minutes of therapy he had to endure for an entire year. But the most devastating part wasn't the pain. It was the feeling of being left behind, the feeling that had haunted Brady since childhood. Michigan, the 199th pick. While the NFL moved on to new games, new seasons, new stories, Brady was left in an empty rehab room, leaning on machines with eyes red from crying. He heard laughter from others at the nearby practice field, teammates running drills, balls thudding on the floor, and he understood he no longer belonged to that world. Not now, maybe never again. That year of recovery was a year Brady wrestled with his own mind. A year of tears, pain, despair. A year where every day, just to perform the smallest action, lift the leg, rotate the knee, stand straight, was a battle. A year he faced the harshest truth of his life. Glory wasn't his, it was only borrowed. And now it had been taken back. But in those months when everything seemed to collapse completely, the strange resilience in Brady began to flicker again. Not the pride of a star, not the confidence of a champion, but the stubbornness of a kid left behind too many times. Brady looked at his thickly bandaged knee, and instead of giving up, told himself the words only those who've stood on the edge can understand. I've climbed the mountain once, I can climb it again, even knowing the cost would be tears, pain, time, his own body. And he began to climb, slowly, painfully, alone. But little by little, Tom Brady returned, not like a breeze but like a storm, and the NFL, without knowing it, was about to witness the greatest comeback in sports history. Tom Brady had experienced the first time in his life when the sky truly fell, but when the ashes settled, from them a new Brady was born, more ruthless, stronger, and with nothing left to lose. But if the 2008 ACL injury was the moment the sky fell for the first time, then Deflategate was the moment Tom Brady was pushed into the deepest pit any American athlete could fall into. A chasm, not from physical pain, but from public humiliation before the entire nation, betrayal by the media, and absolute isolation as the whole world turned away. In January 2015, just hours after the Patriots' big AFC championship win, accusations spread like an uncontrollable wildfire. Patriots used deflated balls. Brady knew and was involved in cheating. Patriots lied. In less than 48 hours, the name Tom Brady, once beloved, idolized, celebrated by America as a symbol of purity and discipline, suddenly became the target of collective outrage. Newspapers that once praised his victories changed their tone. Tom Brady is a cheater, career built on lies. The GOAT turns out to be just a sly old fox. News broadcasts replayed footage of him holding the ball, as if it were criminal evidence. Commentators who once embraced him after wins, now spoke with anger and contempt. He's just the greatest con, so his records are fake. This is the biggest disgrace the NFL has ever seen. And in the middle of that storm, Tom Brady, the man who had stood before millions without flinching, suddenly felt ice cold like a child abandoned in a supermarket. No one stood by him. No teammates, no friends, no media, no America. At home watching the news loop endlessly, Brady could only stare at images of himself dissected as if he were a criminal. Red ticker text scrolled across the screen like blows to his heart. Suspicious, cheater, disgrace. It was no longer professional criticism, it was judgment. A judgment delivered by the entire country. And then the verdict came. Brady suspended for 4 games, coach fined, team penalized, reputation destroyed, image tarnished, all of America mocked. And Brady, who had endured ACL, the 199th pick, QB7 at Michigan, hit the lowest point of his life, not because of football, but because the public trust placed in him was yanked away like a thin sheet of paper. The days that followed were hell. Brady walked into practice feeling eyes on him like he carried guilt. Wherever he went, he felt watched. He ate dinner in his car, turned off the radio to avoid hearing his name. He sat in darkness for hours without a word. Family worried, friends confused, but no one understood the pain, only he felt. His life had been built on effort, not deception, yet no one believed him anymore. And that was crueler than any surgery, any hit, any knockdown on the field. On one particularly bad night, Brady told a loved one something he had never said before. "It's not that I'm afraid of the suspension, it's that I'm afraid everything I've ever achieved will be seen as worthless." That was a wound no doctor could heal. But the beauty of people born from suffering is when pushed into the darkest corner, they don't collapse. They turn into something the world doesn't expect. Deflategate made America think Tom Brady's reputation was dead, but it created the most terrifying version of Brady in history. The Brady of revenge, of obsessive discipline, of steely silence against public attack. He returned to the field after the suspension like a warrior, stripped of honor, and determined to reclaim it at any cost. Those who had criticized, mocked, labeled him a cheater, didn't realize they had lit the fuse for a war Brady would fight to his last breath. And then Super Bowl LI, the fateful game, became the grandest stage for Tom Brady's revenge against fate. The Patriots trailed the Falcons 28-3, a deficit the entire NFL unanimously declared irreversible. The world hurled piercing words, "Karma's hitting him, Brady's done." No one comes back from 28-3, but they forgot one thing: Tom Brady didn't come into this world to be pitied. He came to prove them wrong. His heart wasn't built on luck, it was built on the 199th pick. It was built on QB7. It was built on a torn ACL. It was built on Deflategate. And that night, under blazing lights, Brady threw away every doubt, every humiliation, every accusation the world had pinned on him, and turned it into furious strength. He led the team to score, and score again, and overturned a game every analyst had declared over. He stood alone against the world, against fate, against the charges, and he won. The 28-3 comeback, the greatest victory in Super Bowl history, not to prove he was the GOAT, not for another title, not to become a legend, but to scream in fate's face the words he had carried in his heart since 2000. "I'm not who you think I am." Deflategate had condemned Tom Brady in America's eyes, but Deflategate also allowed him to create the greatest moment of his life. A moment not for the favored, only for those who have fallen, been crushed, had their honor torn apart, yet still rise and win. Because in the end, Tom Brady didn't just survive that scandal, he avenged it. In the most beautiful way only a legend can. But there are wounds in life that even a 28-3 comeback cannot heal. There are pains that don't come from the field, from the press, or from scandals. There are pains that touch the deepest part of a person, where titles, records, and applause become completely meaningless. For Tom Brady, that pain had a name: Ghislaine Brady, his mother. While the whole world was busy calling Brady the GOAT, while fans were lost in the greatest comeback, in a small corner of a home in California, Ghislaine was fighting a vicious cancer. The secret illness the Brady family hid for an entire year, so no one knew that while Tom Brady was being celebrated under blinding lights, his heart was being crushed by the fear of losing the most important person in his life. Ghislaine had always been the woman who smiled, who showed up at her son's games, who clapped enthusiastically whether Brady threw well or poorly. But then suddenly, she started missing games, appearing less, moving less, talking less. On FaceTime calls with Brady, she wore a mask to cover her face. She hid her coughs, hid her fatigue, hid her pain, but her eyes couldn't hide it. Her eyes sank, grew tired, and blurred. When the doctor told her she had cancer, Brady felt like someone had ripped the ground out from under him. He couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. The proud world he had built with sweat, tears, and flesh suddenly became meaningless. He could fight Deflategate, he could fight the media, he could fight the doubt of an entire nation, but how could he fight his mother's cancer? Every chemotherapy session was a knife slicing into Brady's heart. He saw pictures of his mother lying in a hospital bed, her body tiny, her arms so thin he could see every vein, and he felt more powerless than ever. A hero who could save an entire team in the biggest game in history, but couldn't save his mother in the one fight he was truly terrified of losing. In front of the media, Brady had to pretend to be calm. When standing at the microphone, he smiled. He said the usual lines about preparation, effort, next season. but inside, he was screaming. Every interview was mental torture, every game was a fear, the fear that when he walked off the field, when he checked his phone, bad news would be waiting. Every time the Patriots won, he smiled for the press, but the moment he stepped into the locker room, that smile vanished like a light, with its cord yanked. Brady couldn't sleep. He ran in the night just to chase away dark thoughts. He rewatched game film not for strategy, but to keep his mind from thinking about his mother lying in a hospital room, fighting for every breath. And then Super Bowl A arrived. The game where Brady had to carry not just his own honor, not just revenge for Deflategate, but the fear of losing his mother. Before kickoff, Brady looked up at the stands, where the family seats remained empty, because Gillen was too weak to attend. Brady clenched his fists until his nails dug into his skin. He took a deep breath, trying to keep the pain from flooding his heart. He had to play. He had to be strong. He had to be the wall shielding the pain for his entire family. But in that very game, the insane 28-3 game, Brady played as if he weren't fighting for a Lombardi trophy, but for his mother's life. Every throw was a prayer. Every scramble was a plea. Every score was a promise. Mom, I'm still here. I'm fighting for you. And when the Patriots came back to win, all of America erupted. But Brady didn't. He just wanted to find his mother. When the game ended, Brady didn't run to celebrate with teammates, didn't jump on stage, didn't hug the trophy. He ran straight to his family. Gillen had been brought to the stadium in a wheelchair. She wore a thick jacket, a scarf, a hat to hide the hair lost to chemo. When Brady saw his mother in the tunnel, he stopped. In that moment, time froze. No more stadium lights, no more fireworks, no more cheers from millions. Just a son who had fought the entire world to get back to his mother. Brady dropped to his knees, wrapped his arms around her, pulled her close to his chest. Gillen cried. Brady cried. The tears he had held back all season finally poured out. The coaching staff watched and teared up. Teammates stood at a distance, silent. The entire stadium seemed to sink into that moment, because everyone understood that win wasn't Brady's. It belonged to his mother. It belonged to the quiet resilience of a woman fighting in silence. It belonged to a love that no scandal, no accusation, no doubt could touch. That was the moment glory became small, beside a mother's love. The moment the world saw a Tom Brady, who wasn't the GOAT, wasn't a legend, wasn't a winner, but a son, scared, hurting, loving his mother more than anything. And that moment, Brady embracing his mother amid the crowd, became the most beautiful, most painful, and truest scar of his life. Because there are victories never recorded in record books, but they are etched in the heart, and Brady endured unhealable pain just for that moment, just to hold his mother one more time. After years of fighting for his mother, fighting against America, fighting fate on the field, Tom Brady thought he had experienced every kind of pain a person could face. But no. Life had saved another wound for him, one that didn't bleed, didn't break bones, didn't need painkillers, but tore at his soul in a way no loss ever had, a marriage starting to crack. If football was Brady's destiny, Gisele Bündchen had once been the only place he found peace in a world full of noise, pressure, and criticism. They had been America's perfect couple, the greatest NFL athlete and the most successful supermodel in the world, two people who seemed to step off magazine covers into real life together. But like every great tragedy, the collapse didn't come from one single event. It came from small things, cracks almost inaudible, then spreading wider. And what started it all was time, the asset Gisele needed from her husband, but that Brady gave to football. When his mother recovered from chemo, he thought he could breathe easier. But the NFL didn't give him time. He went back to the field, back to the gym, back to the film table, back to the 20-hour days of a man obsessed with winning. And Gisele, who had stood by him through every storm, began to feel she was no longer beside him, but behind him. For years Gisele supported Brady, sacrificed her career to be his backbone, to raise the family, to shield the kids from the media and the chaos Brady brought home. But when Brady entered his 40s, an age when most players had long retired, Gisele began hoping for what she thought Brady wanted too, a complete family, a present husband, a normal life. She wanted him home more, wanted him to take the kids to school, wanted him to eat dinner without a phone beside him, wanted him to sleep without getting up to re-watch film, wanted him to be Tom Brady, the man, the father, the husband, not Tom Brady, the hero of America. But Brady didn't know how to stop. The NFL wasn't just his job, it was where he proved his worth, where he found reason to keep living after childhood, years of being dismissed, where he felt he wasn't invisible. And the tragedy began there. Small arguments became big disputes, questions became accusations, sighs became tears. Every time Gisele said, "You're not here anymore," Brady replied, "I have to finish what I started." But they weren't really talking about football, they were talking about fear. Brady's fear of losing his identity, and Gisele's fear of losing the family. Brady knew he was drifting from her, but didn't know how to turn back. Gisele knew she was losing him, but couldn't compete with what Brady had chased his whole life. Slowly, they no longer looked in the same direction. Some nights, Brady came home late from practice, body aching. But he opened the door to a dark house. No children's laughter, no voices, no lights, no one waiting, just a cold emptiness, where only Brady's shadow on the wall moved. He sat at the kitchen table, set his phone beside a glass of water, stared into space, and felt his heart empty in a way it never had before. He was used to loneliness in Michigan, in the Patriots' locker room, in front of the media, but loneliness in his own home, that was a pain no armor could protect him from. Those silent evenings became routine. Some days, Gisele put the kids to bed early, and didn't want to talk. Others, she slept in a separate room. Sometimes they exchanged a few words, but those words were heavy as boulders. "You love football more than this family." A light sentence, an ordinary sentence, a sentence someone might say in anger. But to Brady, it was an arrow straight through his chest, because part of it was true. He loved football, not more than his family. But deep inside, football was the one thing that had never abandoned him. When he was dismissed, it was there. When he was mocked, it was there. When he was injured, it was there. When his mother was sick, it was there. The only place he could hide so he wouldn't collapse. How could he explain that to Gisele? How could he say he didn't love football more than her, but he needed it to survive? And Gisele couldn't say she was exhausted. Exhausted from waiting for him to come home. Exhausted from always standing in his shadow, exhausted from holding the family together, while Tom was absent, exhausted from handling everything alone, while he tried to save the football world, exhausted from sacrificing herself. Arguments slowly turned to silence, and silence slowly turned to distance. Brady walked into the bedroom, and didn't know what to say. Gisele looked at him, and didn't know what to say. Two people who loved each other, but the air was full of things that couldn't be spoken. Tom Brady, the man unbreakable on the field, the one who overcame every barrier, suddenly became small in his own home. He didn't know how to save a marriage the way he saved the Patriots, because this fight had no playbook, no strategy, no teammates, no timeouts, no overtime to fix mistakes. It was a fight where sometimes winning didn't save anything. And those nights, Brady drove aimlessly in the dark, times sitting alone in the kitchen, moments hearing Gisele cry behind a closed door, were truly the cruelest tragedy of his life. Because football had never broken him, but a crumbling family did. And for the first time in years, Brady felt powerless, felt he was losing something he couldn't win back with effort, discipline or will. A foreshadowing of a tragedy he tried to avoid, but couldn't. Because love sometimes doesn't lose to betrayal. It loses when two hearts no longer beat together. And Tom Brady, the greatest in NFL history, was facing the deepest wound of his life, a marriage slowly dying in silence. Divorce is a simple word, but what happened to Tom Brady in 2022 was anything but simple. It wasn't like a private decision between two adults. It was like a public execution, where a man's heart was torn apart in front of all of America, while he still had to keep smiling for the cameras, keep playing the role of the hero, keep up the image of the strong man who never falls. As the rumors spread, as the press swarmed outside his house, as tabloids posted judgmental lines like "Gisele has left," "Gisele has had enough," Brady chose football, not family. He knew the worst was happening. It was no longer a possibility. It was reality. Gisely, the one who had stood beside him in every game, hugged him in wins and losses, the only peaceful sky he had walked out that door, taking a part of him he could never get back. When the press release went out, simple and cold, Tom Brady sat in his office, staring at the words, "We have decided to end our marriage," and felt like someone was slowly crushing his heart bit by bit. He had known the truth long before that day, but knowing in advance didn't make it hurt less. It only made him witness the slow, cruel collapse. And then that day came, the day the whole world watched the Brady family officially break apart. The door closed behind Gisely, and the sound of her footsteps echoed in the long hallway. That sound became a scar in his mind, one he carried into the years that followed. The press swarmed his house like a disturbed hive. Cameras flashed every time he stepped out of his car. Questions flew like knives. Do you regret it? Was it because you chose football? Did Gisely endure too much? Did your family die because of your selfishness? Brady didn't answer, not because he was arrogant, but because he couldn't. The pain was too great to speak. When he walked into practice, he tried to smile, tried to act strong, tried to pretend nothing had happened. But his teammates knew, his coaches knew, the world knew. Tom Brady had lost his smile, the smile that once made America believe he would never fall. The nights after the divorce were the darkest of his life. The once spacious house now turned into an empty, cold, silent space, where he could hear the wall clock ticking every beat. Family photos on the shelves became thorns, empty chairs became cruel witnesses, children's toys scattered in the living room became reminders of a family that once existed, once happy, and now only memories. Brady suffered prolonged insomnia. He lay staring at the ceiling for hours, not knowing what to do, not knowing what he was living for. His body was tired, but his mind was worse. He had endured a torn ACL, broken ribs from hits, concussions, but never had he trembled like this from losing his family, because for the first time in his life, he didn't know if he could get back up. Some nights he sat on the sofa, head buried in his hands, just gasping for breath, trying to keep his heart from shattering. No painkiller worked for this pain, no physical therapy could heal it, no coach could guide him through it. And then in an unforgettable moment, Brady said the words he had hidden for months, "I don't know who I am anymore." He had always known who he was. QB7 left behind, the 199th pick dismissed, the hero of the 28-3 comeback, the champion of every big game, the son who fought for his mother, the strong man standing in media storms. But the man after divorce wasn't the Tom Brady America knew. He was a broken, lost, exhausted version, drained from the inside. Mornings waking up, he looked in the mirror and saw nothing but empty eyes. No hero, no champion, just a man who had traded too much. He even said on a podcast, "I feel like my whole life is being pulled away from me." And that was the truth. He lost his family, lost the arms of the woman who understood him most, lost family dinners, lost the home atmosphere he thought he'd grow old in, lost the feeling of coming home to someone waiting, and even more heartbreaking, he blamed himself. Brady thought of all the times he missed a kid's birthday party for practice, the times he arrived late to parent-teacher meetings, the times he bowed his head apologizing to Gisely for staying at the field a few more hours, the times Gisely said, "I feel like you're not here," the times he promised but didn't follow through. He knew, he understood, but he couldn't change the past. He could only look at it like shattered glass, cutting his eyes, cutting his heart, but impossible to piece back together. After the divorce, Brady tried to return to the field, but every throw carried a different weight. Every game felt covered in invisible sadness. On the field he still looked strong, calm, like Brady. But when cameras zoomed on his face, people saw something never seen before: emptiness. Not physical fatigue, but soul fatigue. He was no longer invincible, and the only thing keeping him from collapsing was his kids. They became his only lifeline in that brutal storm. Jack, Benjamin, Vivian, those three children were the only thing pulling him from the abyss. They hugged him every weekend. They said, "Dad, we love you." They wrote little cards to stick on the fridge, "Daddy is the best." They made him feel he still had value when the world, and he himself doubted it. When he was with them, he wasn't the GOAT, wasn't a legend, wasn't the 199th pick, wasn't the man who just lost his family, he was just dad, and that was the only thing that didn't leave him. But even with his kids as his anchor, the pain remained, smoldering, heavy, silent. That psychological wound was deeper than any hit life had ever dealt him. It didn't tear skin, it tore soul. And Tom Brady, the man who once stood tall in storms, was now struggling to stand amid the ruins of his own heart. And the most tragic part, this was only the beginning of a tear-filled journey to rebirth. After the divorce, after months struggling in loneliness and unhealable lingering pain, Tom Brady still had one more battle to face, a battle no Lombardi trophy could help him overcome, no comeback could fix, no throw could save. That battle came the day he decided to leave the NFL, the day he retired. The world saw Brady post a video saying, "I'm retiring, for good this time," in a gentle, warm voice, light like the Florida sea breeze. But no one saw his hand tremble slightly as he held the phone. No one saw how many sleepless nights it took before he dared hit record. No one saw the moment right after turning off the camera, when he sat alone on the beach, eyes red, trying to breathe, as if the world had suddenly lost gravity. Retirement wasn't the end of a career, it was the collapse of an identity. For over 2 decades, Brady woke up with the same goal: train, improve, win. Every drop of sweat, every meeting, every lift, every hour of film study, all of it was the threads tying him to his reason for living. But when those threads were cut in one day, he fell into a void so deep even he couldn't imagine it. The first days after retirement, Brady tried to reassure himself. He took the kids to school, did yoga, cooked, answered emails, smiled at neighbors, but it was all surface. Inside, he was like someone trying to balance on thin, cracking ice, because every morning waking up, the first thought was, today there's no practice, no game, no playbook, no goal. And in those silent moments, his greatest fear rose. Brady admitted in an interview, "I'm afraid of days without football, afraid to the point of trembling, afraid to the point his heart skipped beats, afraid to the point he felt he no longer knew who he was, because football wasn't just a job, it was his identity, his lighthouse, the one thing that never betrayed him, the only place he felt purpose." And now, all gone. Others who retired talk about relief, freedom, peace. But for Brady, it was only terrifying silence. A silence not of peace, but of loss. He said, "I'm afraid of the silence that let him hear his heart beating irregularly, the silence that reminded him of the empty house after divorce, the silence that made him hear the questions he'd avoided his whole life. If not football, who am I? What do I live for? Do I still have value?" And that silence was his greatest opponent ever. Not Eli Manning, not Patrick Mahomes, not Father Time, but his own mind. Brady started losing rhythm in life. No more practice schedule, no more film hours, no more game days, no more meetings. His body still woke at 4:45 a.m. from 20 years of habit, but with nowhere to go. He wandered to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, stared at the ocean, and felt like a sailboat without sails. Days stretched endlessly, nights grew heavy, the emptiness began gnawing at his mind from within. Some days he drove for hours not knowing where he was going. Some days he lay on the living room floor, playing podcasts or TV, just for noise, to chase away the quiet in his head. Some days he replayed old games, wins, losses, glorious moments, and felt like he was watching someone else's life, someone stronger than him, more confident than him, clearer than him. Because the post-retirement Brady wasn't like any Brady before, empty, lost, bewildered, like someone waking from a long dream not knowing what reality is. Fans thought he'd enjoy the new life, travel, be a CEO, appear on TV, but the truth was, he was just trying to survive each day without being swallowed by anxiety. He tried to find himself again, but himself had been fully claimed by football for 20 years. When that vanished, the rest of him vanished too. His kids were the only lifeline keeping him from sinking. He spent more time with Jack, Benjamin, Vivian, took them to school, to ice cream, to movies, smiled more around them, but every time they went to bed, said "Good night, Dad," closed the door, and he was alone. The fear rushed back, and he understood this battle wasn't on the field. It was in his mind, in silent nights, in meaningless mornings, in the question he faced every day: if I'm not number 12, who am I? This wasn't a season, wasn't a scandal, wasn't an injury. This was the journey to find himself again, when the stadium lights went out, when the cheers faded, when family had gone, when the body was weary, and the heart was no longer the same. And Tom Brady, the man who had won every battle, was now facing the one battle that could defeat him, the battle against the darkness in his own mind. And then, as the mental battle was drowning him after retirement, an even crueler truth quietly crept in like a shadow Brady couldn't escape. His body was falling apart, not metaphorically, literally, piece by piece. For over 2 decades, Brady had stood in the NFL like an impregnable fortress. He always said he was fine, okay, good to go. But that was just a thin armor hiding a horrifying truth. Every inch of his body bore the scars of war. His knees, where the ACL was torn apart in 2008, never fully healed. They swelled every morning when he stepped out of bed. Some days, just to pull on sweatpants, he had to grip the dresser to stay balanced. His back had suffered disc bulges so severe that doctors said 1 more millimeter and he could have lost feeling in one leg. His right shoulder, the arm that produced thousands of history-changing passes, now hurt so much he couldn't turn a doorknob forcefully or hold his daughter for more than 2 minutes. His fingers, broken, dislocated, ligaments torn, now curved slightly like an old man's, aching sharply when the weather changed. Every morning for Brady wasn't routine. It was a negotiation with his body, a small battle, a reminder that the price of greatness is always paid in pain, in flesh and bone, in things the audience never sees. But physical pain was only the tip of the iceberg. The cruelest part lay inside his head, the aftermath of over 20 years of concussions. Brady never publicly admitted how many times his head was hit hard enough to see white light or not stand steady, but teammates and coaches knew the number was in the hundreds. No one plays QB without taking dozens of full-force hits every season. No one lasts 20 years in the NFL without repeated concussions, and Brady, with his pathological stubbornness, always hid the consequences. But after retirement, the consequences started knocking, softly, but clearly. He began forgetting small things. At first, just misplacing keys, then forgetting to make breakfast for the kids as promised, then forgetting what he was saying mid-sentence. Friends said there was a time, mid-joke, Brady stopped because he couldn't remember the punchline. Another time, he stood in the kitchen and forgot why he'd walked in. Brady didn't admit it right away. He laughed it off, said, "I'm just a little tired." But when night fell and silence covered the house, a fear began gripping him, a fear he'd never faced in any Super Bowl, the fear that one day he wouldn't remember his children's childhoods. This wasn't vague fear, it was real, the fear many former NFL players have lived, when short-term memory is destroyed by cumulative concussions. Brady knew it. He'd read the studies. He knew the names of players who lost memories. He knew stories of legends forgetting their kids' birthdays, forgetting the way home, forgetting the scent of the person they loved most, and he was afraid. Afraid enough that some nights Brady sat in the dark bedroom, opening old photo albums of the kids, Jack playing ball, Ben grinning on the beach, Vivian running in the garden, and stared at them for a long time, as if trying to etch those images into his mind before it was too late. He once told a friend, "I can handle joint pain, back pain, shoulder pain, but losing memories of my kids, I couldn't live with that." But he still got up every morning, stretched through lingering pain, played golf while his head throbbed, smiled even as memory fogged slightly, and learned to live like an old soldier who knows his body is crumbling but must keep marching. Some days he just wanted to lie down and let his mind go blank, but he didn't allow himself to collapse. For those 3 kids, for the man they believed was stronger than anyone on earth. So Brady learned to live with pain the way a battle-hardened soldier lives with scars, without complaining, without avoiding, just accepting and moving forward. But every step hurt. Every day was hard, and every memory, the moments he tried to hold on to, became a battle. No one knew that when they saw Brady on TV. No one knew when they saw him smile at public events. No one knew when he appeared in ads or podcasts. But inside, Brady was fighting an enemy he couldn't throw to, couldn't tackle, couldn't read and defeat with strategy. That enemy was time, was aftermath, was the fear of memories slipping away bit by bit. And in that fight, Brady stood not as the invincible hero anymore, but as a man, with a broken body, with a heart scarred too many times, trying to hold on to the most precious thing in his life, memories of those he loves. Because some victories are recorded in books, but some victories are only recorded in the heart, victories Brady fights for every day, alone and in silence. And then, looking back at the entire journey, people often talk about the 7 Super Bowl rings, 23 seasons played, thousands of historic passes, and moments that left America breathless. But those numbers, however unrepeatable and great, are only the tip of the iceberg. Tom Brady's true legacy isn't in the stats, isn't in the records, isn't in the headlines calling him the GOAT. That legacy lies in what he endured that the world never saw. Behind the stadium lights was a body literally torn apart, ligaments shredded, fingers crooked, shoulder torn, back misaligned, knees swelling like balls every morning, short-term memory threatened by concussions, equivalent to a soldier's lifetime. A vague but real haunting fear, the fear that one day he'd look at his children's faces and not recognize them. Behind the glorious victories was a heart broken many times, broken on nights his mother went through chemo, broken when his honor was smeared in Deflategate, broken when Gazelle walked out the door of his life, broken when he signed divorce papers with a hand still shaking from the last game. Behind the hero image was a man who lost his family, lost his anchor, lost his peace. Nights sitting alone in an empty house, no children's laughter, no clinking dishes, no one waiting at the door. Mornings waking up not knowing what he was living for. The war he had to fight in silence, the hardest, longest, most painful war of his life, the war to hold on to himself. But what makes Brady truly great isn't that he overcame all of it. It's that he kept getting up every time he was knocked down, getting up with kindness, with love for his children, with rare humility for a legend, and with a heart still whole despite life trying to crush it countless times. He didn't collapse under the pressure of fame, didn't turn bitterness into hatred, didn't turn loss into darkness. He kept living by being a gentle father, quietly being a good person, and continuing to give what he had left when his body and soul were exhausted. That is the legacy no game can record, no camera can capture fully, no stat sheet can show. It can only be seen when we understand Brady wasn't the invincible hero America built. He was just a man who lived so fully he ravaged himself. A man who loved so deeply he was hurt by that very love. A man who endured until he had nothing left to lose, yet still chose to rise kindly. A man who walked through hell many times, but emerged each time with a heart that didn't turn to stone. And that is true greatness. Not the 7 rings, not the comebacks, not the millions of fans cheering, but that after everything, after pain, after loss, after collapse, Tom Brady still held on to something many never touch in life: humanity. He isn't just the GOAT of the NFL, he is an example of the strength the world rarely values. The strength of a heart that refuses hatred despite being wounded to the core. A father who never quits. A man who never loses his essence. A soul that rises from ashes without turning others to ashes. And when looking back at that life, people don't just see a football legend. They see a tragic, beautiful, haunting story of human resilience. A story not to glorify triumph, but to remind that even the strongest can break, and it's how they rise that makes their legacy. Brady's legacy isn't that he conquered the NFL, it's that he conquered life the way a true man should, with goodness, with perseverance, and with a heart that never stops loving. The story of Tom Brady, when viewed in full, is no longer just about 7 Super Bowl rings or 23 glorious seasons. It is the story of a human who paid with his childhood, his health, his honor, and his family to be celebrated by America as an icon. In that journey we see not only glory, but suffocating dark corners from the skinny kid buried at QB7 in Michigan to the young man humiliated in the 199th pick, then becoming a hero who never dared admit he ate dinner in his car because he was too lonely and too exhausted from the media. We see a Brady enduring tear-filled physical therapy years after the 2008 ACL injury, then enduring national humiliation in Deflategate, called a cheater, suspended, turned into a villain. We see him fight like a warrior while his mother went through chemo, and play a Super Bowl with the fear of losing the most important person in his life. But perhaps the most tragic is the moment his family broke apart in 2022. Brady admitting he no longer knew who he was, coming home to silent rooms without laughter, sleepless and lost, in a way no career loss ever did to him, and then in retirement, facing the greatest darkness, fear of silence, of a shattered body, of fading memory. From this story, Americans can see a truth society often forgets heroes can break too. They get lonely, hurt, lost. Greatness isn't in where they win, but in how they rise from ruins. Brady reminds us that success isn't enough for human happiness. What keeps us alive is love, kindness, and family. And that sometimes the most important lesson isn't conquer the world, but learning to hold on to your heart through the storms. If you want to continue joining stories of strength, pain, and resilience like Tom Brady's journey, please subscribe so you don't miss the next videos. Thank you for staying until the end, and see you again in the next deeply human journey in the upcoming video.